honour to be with you. Thank you very much for the warm welcome. I've actually worked in the automotive industry for over 4 decades. Don't look old enough, do I? Get some great feedback, but okay. So yeah, thank you very much for the introduction. So Dan asked me to give a slightly different perspective. I'm an automotive engineer at heart and love the automotive industry, but also have great interest in new energy things as well. So I'll share a few thoughts. So firstly, energy is actually quality of life. It's directly proportional to quality of life. And beginning of man, they discovered fire. That was energy, and it transformed the livelihoods. So energy has always been a foundation to life. And one of the most important things is access to energy has transformed many aspects of life exponentially, particularly for the privileged. Food, medicine, buildings, clothing, even connected services is a key part of our lives now. Imagine life without the internet and everything else that comes with it. And also mobility, all forms of mobility. So access to energy and consumption is fundamental to all of these elements. Does yes cause a social divide? But it is key to all of those elements. And mobility is just part of that ecosystem, and it's important that mobility is seen as part of that ecosystem. And as global population increases, the Human Development Index, as you can see here, is directly proportional to engine energy requirements, and it will only increase. So the key point is energy unlocks quality of life, and it cannot just be rationed. Some people think that you can just ration energy and that will solve global warming. It won't ultimately work. Innovation for sustainable energy is what is required. So then, looking at the ecosystem, where are we? The need for energy has driven over-reliance on regions of the world that have oil, and recent terrible events over the last 18 months in Europe has really emphasised that there is an over-reliance on certain parts of the globe, certain countries that really are taking it over control. Also, fossil fuels now. Everybody understands that fossil fuels is driving climate change. Excess levels of consumption for some. That is true. There's complete excess in some areas. And there's an over-exploitation of natural resources, resulting in the emissions. And the evidence of how it's damaging quality of life across the globe and really causing harm to the planet is now just everybody starts to understand it. And so energy independence is really one of the things that we really must focus on in all parts of the world, to be independent. And new energy independence is the opportunity to unlock this geopolitical grip that some have on us, and also solve the environmental issues at the same time. So leveraging the renewable sources is an opportunity that must not be missed. And it's a win-win for all. Economic, energy solutions for quality of life. You want more energy to make life even better, more without damaging the environment. So true sustainability is an energy solution that most must be economic, which I know some people shy away with when they talk about the environment. It needs to make economic long-term sense. There might be some short-term significant investments that governments need to make that ultimately drives environmental solutions. So this geopolitical shift, the previous value was in the oil economy. The transport sector, if you focus just on the transport sector for a moment, which is why we're here, has the highest dependency on fossil fuels. And if you look at 37% of the emissions in 2021, it came from that sector. The world, though, is transferring to a rare earth material economy. That has taken a significant shift, and the economic power is starting to move. Yes, there's a grip from the oil-driven economies to stay control, but this rare earth economy is really starting to get a pull. And the fact is, the Chinese have been incredibly strategic, utmost respect for what they've done, and they control so much of that ecosystem, despite the fact that it's across the globe. Energy independence. China has got this strategy for many years. Been lucky enough to be going to China for well over a decade and a half, and you can see the strategic push from the government. And they are currently beating their renewable targets at an incredible rate. For example, they were over 51%, to provide over 51% of renewable energies in 2023, 2 years ahead of their revised goal that they put down. So they're growing at an ever increasing rate. But coming back to some of the points the Minister made, they've also leveraged this whole ecosystem. So they now supply over 75% of the globe's global supply of solar panels. It's actually nearly 80. Over 50% of the wind turbines also come from China, and 75% of the global supply of batteries. And the largest, most respected battery companies are now in China, and they are absolutely pioneering. Slightly ironic that the lithium-ion battery was actually invented in my hometown. How ironic is that? The other key piece then is if you start to look at the automotive industry, and the automotive industry is a key GDP opportunity and part of any economy, particularly here. And in China, electric vehicles are the logical sense. If you own the full ecosystem, it's the logical solution. I am pro battery electric vehicles, by the way. Please don't misread me. The Chinese mobility companies are developing high quality battery electric vehicles now. Many people for years I saw in Europe were very negative about their capability. Trust me, we've been going out for a few years. Their capability is amazing and those cars are fantastic. And it's all an outcome of a long-term government strategy that has pushed this. And it's really now starting to pay off. So China is racing ahead, but it's not an accident. They are leveraging the economic benefits of what they've set out and controlling their new energy ecosystem. So, European automotive companies, where are they and what's happening? I think there could be a crisis. The background is traditional OEMs have matured their whole ecosystem for internal combustion engines for decades. And they've grown capability, grown supply base, outsourced engineering, outsourced know-how. But as a pointer, they have the ability to make an internal combustion engine car for about €10,000 cost. You can see a breakdown here at the bottom of a traditional ICE. That's very roughly the breakdown. I've pulled the source from BCG, so it's a published document. And then you can see BEVs at the top. Now, the background is that, of course, post-Dieselgate, which terrible thing to happen, and the environmental pressures, quite rightly, that are coming from all the pollutions, as I mentioned earlier, zero tailpipe solutions is being pushed. And the BEV is the current best option to fit that legislation. Now, the truth is, the traditional OEMs, particularly the European ones, are really struggling to meet the cost base, and predominantly due to the propulsion systems, although there's some other factors. And you can see here the propulsion systems, batteries about €7,000, thermal engine about 3, the propulsion system, so about 4,500 versus about 10. There is an order of magnitude discrepancy. And the Chinese OEMs owning this whole infrastructure, they have got vehicles that they can meet the same cost basis, because this is synthetic of European automotive costs. So the European automotive industry, which is dear to this country, I assure you, is under threat, and it needs economic and environmental solutions, new technology and new ways to operate to indeed survive long term. So First area of focus has to be to look at the cost across and compare what other OEMs are already doing and the sort of savings they're yielding. So, innovation to integrate systems. So the vehicles need to be cheaper, and if you look at some of the body and trim, chassis systems, innovation needs to be to integrate more of those systems to take out parts, take out manufacturing costs, and simply reduce the costs. We've been looking at this together, and we believe there's at least 5 or 10%, probably 10% needs to be the target of cost that needs to come out of probably nearly all automotive manufacturers. Complexity reduction. Elon Musk, Tesla, really respect him. Some other things, let's not debate that. Let's respect what he's technically done in the automotive industry, not get into politics. He has reset so many of the rules. He launched his Tesla 3 with, I think it's 180 derivatives. Transforms the complexity of his vehicles. Everybody says nobody will buy them because they haven't got the choice. Doesn't seem to be a problem, does it? But the fact that he has such a small amount of complexity means that he's completely set up his ecosystem in a lean, efficient way. He doesn't carry all of the overhead of all the complexity that's become normal practice in European, in fact, or global OEMs. So the complexity of a typical European vehicle is about 1 billion combinations. Imagine all the components that are sequenced trackside, the multiple components you have, the service and infrastructure. Again, we believe there is at least 5, we think probably 10% of cost to come out of that. And that's the only way that they're going to compete is to tackle that cost. The other area, and it comes back to the long-term investment from the Chinese. If you look at BYD, 75% of their commodities are actually manufactured internally within the BYD ecosystem. Now this means that they enjoy not only bespoke systems for their vehicles which are more cost effective, a little bit of the Apple philosophy, they also keep all of that cost, skill, know-how internally. And of course that has been stimulated and built new from government incentives. Again, this is worth 10 or 15%. There's a lot of the supply base in Romania as well, so very important for European OEMs. They also need to focus on streamlined tech. Full connectivity and communication is key for the users now. People will not accept not having that in their vehicles. And it's also an opportunity that if you take the cost and build it into the vehicles, you can sell vehicles direct. You can conduct remote diagnostics, you can conduct prognostics, you can monitor what the vehicles are doing, you can gather data in the safety system, you can continually update the vehicles. That ecosystem in itself, again, is worth between 10 and 15%. Also, the capability needs to be for significantly more driver aids and autonomous capability, which maybe full autonomous in the bottom segments won't come instantly, but more of that technology will come because safety does sell vehicles. Safety is part of what humanity cares about. And so that is an area that needs to be focused on as well. So OEMs need to target cost reduction in Europe dramatically to survive, probably circa 50%. And they need to also ensure that streamlined technology is part of that offering as well. Because as Elon has proved, its cost of entry, and trust me, if you look at the Chinese market, high tech is absolutely the need that all of the customers want and will continue to grow. So if you then move on to the propulsion systems, the current systems need complexity reduction in terms of integrating those systems. So for example, the batteries need to go directly into the vehicle without separate packs, so you can take that cost and weight out. Because currently, although the battery electric vehicles on the road today are fantastic and they're brilliant to drive, ultimately the batteries are too bulky and they're lacking the performance and the requirements that the discerning customers really won't accept. So yes, there's a really good start, but as it moves forward, customers are worried about range anxiety still. They're worried about the longevity of the batteries still. And there's a fair amount of logic to say it's a real fear, because there will be a next generation of propulsion systems. There's also a heavy reliance on this expensive rare earth materials, which 75% of the batteries are manufactured, and the leaders already said, in China. So that ecosystem of that reliance is starting to grow. So the real opportunity is to leverage technology, foster the next generation of propulsion systems that's going to come, foster solutions that don't have rare earth materials, more emphasis on induction machines, etc., integrating all of those systems to use less rare earth materials. And also look at things like solid-state batteries. Yes, I know solid-state batteries. I worked 10 years ago, was going to be 3 or 4 years away. Even today, it's 3 or 4 years away. The point is, new technology in batteries will come. There will be a sudden shift. And the European automotive industry needs to be on to push that, because that could be the opportunity to jump and take that opportunity. Also, need to develop alternative propulsion systems, because simply the first generation battery vehicles, they're a fantastic start, they're great fun, and they are the start of a sustainable solution, but they're not the ultimate solution that is going to be there. One of the conversations we had about recycling batteries, very quickly, because we talked about old vehicles coming into Romania, ICE vehicles, very quickly, over the next 5 to 6 years, there's going to become a problem of recycling those first generation of batteries. That is going to come as well. So there's a new ecosystem with that as well. And this challenge of the delta of about €4,500 for propulsion system in ICE versus €10,000 is one of the key areas that needs extensive focus. The Chinese are absolutely focused on delivering and transforming. And there was a question, and I nearly jumped up because I completely agree, about all of the other sectors of mobility, but also vehicles and machinery that are high energy usage. And I would suggest to look at those as some of the clues of where technology will be. Because simply, one of the problems is the bigger the vehicle, the more battery you need, the more you end up with diminishing returns as the battery becomes bigger and bigger and bigger, and becomes so much of the weight of the vehicle. The challenge is propelling the battery. It's the laws of physics. So if you look at the solutions of many of these high energy usages, there needs to be a change. And new electric sustainable propulsion systems must ultimately develop to satisfy these. The solutions coming from these could then be what comes into automotive next. And just to give some sound bites of the energy that a typical battery electric vehicle, plus minus depending on weather and everything else, could you say plus minus? A typical coach full of people will use 100 kilowatts, maybe more, depending on cold weather and such like. So you start to extrapolate these usages as you go into some of this machinery. And there's a really interesting film from Caterpillar where they've made a 250-ton mining machine fully electric. They wouldn't even disclose how big the battery was. They talked about 1,000 kilowatt hour machine, but then said they wouldn't actually say what it was. I mean, the size of that is absolutely incredible. And they proudly show it climbing out the mine once and then driving back down to the bottom. Guess what? They then put it back on charge. So these really, really extensive use cases are 20x, 30x, 50x, keep on going. Imagine a combine harvester in a field. You know, some of this big machinery can use 1,000 litres of diesel in a 24-hour period. The battery systems for that, you know, it's mind-boggling. So there are many solutions there, and my real message is these other opportunities need to be looked at. You know, my message if the ministers were here would be, spend your taxation money on driving the innovation. Try and be the leaders, like the Chinese were a few years ago, on the next generation. Because new high energy usage vehicles have high uptime and they need high resilience and they're required. But the ultimate solution is going to take some time. Now, one of the other solutions, and it was mentioned earlier, is hydrogen. Now, I think hydrogen got a bad reputation a few years ago, and perhaps it was pushed a little bit too early, or probably was pushed a little bit too early. I think events of wars and this focus on over-reliance on oil-driven economies is really helping everybody see that green hydrogen potentially is one of the most efficient renewable solutions for true sustainability. The fuel could be the root of any country's energy independence from their own renewable sources that are being invested in heavily, because they could ultimately make economic and environmental solution as well. One of the key things is peak shaving. The more you introduce renewable energies, be it solar, be it wind turbines, you have peaks and troughs of supply. You've done some awesome things in Romania. The hydro projects and such like, they're fantastic. But it's actually the same space that is really affected by green hydrogen. If you can have green hydrogen mopping up energy that currently people are actually dreaming up sources of how to actually use it, producing this green hydrogen is then very portable and it's very, very usable. And the benefits of green hydrogen in mobility is simply that the vehicle can have significantly higher range. It's very easy to package 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 kilograms of hydrogen, which has got an amazing amount of energy in it. So suddenly it could be a solution for much of the bigger vehicles. Refueling time is instant, really, really is fast. Yes, you need an infrastructure for refueling, of course, but you could set your hydrogen facility up to be distributed across the grid, because the electrical grid, again, is one of the big challenges of the civilised world, because the grid cannot the energy demand. So a distributed grid, mopping up renewables across the grid and then resupplying it back into the grid, also harvesting the hydrogen for usage, could be a real opportunity. So green hydrogen enables a full energy ecosystem, and I would really encourage it to be focused, and mobility could be part of that. So, in summary, energy is key to quality of life, and quality of life can be measured by energy. And you cannot ration it. Trying to ration it simply won't work. But we must combat environmental change. For sustainable solutions to truly last, I firmly believe ultimately they need to be driven by economic logic. Yes, there needs to be a significant investment to get that going, but ultimately it needs to be run and maintained with economic logic. There is definitely a crisis heading towards the European automotive organisations in terms of cost of the battery electric vehicles. And these vehicles are key in their production to the GDP of Europe. It is absolutely key and must be protected. I was talking to the Minister earlier, and he talked about the shipping industry disappearing in the 90s. I'm definitely old enough to remember that. But the same thing could happen, or quite likely will happen, if there's not intervention, would be my honest view. First generation battery electric vehicles, fantastic start. And they are the start of sustainable mobility. It's really, really exciting. But they're not the final technical optimised solution. A full range of strategic sustainable options needs to be planned, of which mobility needs to be part of it. The ultimate goal for any economy has to be energy independence. There's actually an opportunity that energy independence can be seized by many other economies that never thought they'd have control of the oil-driven economy. And strategic intervention for innovation is the key to that. So thank you for your time, and I'll hand back to young Mr. Dan Vardy.